Welcome to a new episode Beyond Perception. My name is Simon, and it is my true pleasure to be here today for a second conversation with Marianne and Johan Niklasson. And to introduce you briefly, the both of you are really dedicated to educate about Amanita Muscaria to, from what I know, support people and waking up and really empower more people to manifest who they are and also their dreams. So it's a real great joy to come here together with you. Welcome, Marianne and Johan.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I just said it. No, we had a first conversation a couple of months ago, and you introduced us and the audience to Amanita Muscaria and also provided a bit of a bigger picture about its benefits for humanity, but also why the knowledge about it was kept secret for some time. And I shared it just with you. That conversation sparked quite some interest, and so people keep discovering it and watching our first conversation, like even daily. So that's quite fascinating to me. And what I would love to hear, or would be my first question to you now over the last 4 months. So what has been experiencing? What has been your experiencing? What have you been? What has been happening on your side after that first conversation?
Should I start?
Sure.
Yeah, so for us it's a continuous journey, really, of discovering and applying the benefits of Amanita Muscaria into our work. And it's important to understand that there is no general Amanita Muscaria work or context, and everyone who is interested in this plant will approach it from their own angle and with their own story, and will see different things. So what we have presented is not the ultimate truth or the only reality. It depends on your background, how you will approach this subject. And we noticed that in how people are being interested, also in what we said on your podcast before, and also on the platform that we offer, that seems to be a general awakening of sorts, that there are many people that are, for whatever reason, popping into the world of Amanita Muscaria. It might be that they're just walking in the forest and suddenly they see it and it triggers a deep interest in them, or they stumble upon your podcast, or they have dreams with Amanita Muscaria in the dreams. So we would say that we are part of this wave of individuals who are becoming interested in Amanita Muscaria, and almost as if it is some kind of a calling. Many people say that they have been called into the use of Amanita Muscaria.
Yeah, I wanted just to say that many people actually contact us and saying, I've been called, or I suddenly found this mushroom and it seemed like it was speaking to me, or I feel like I'm, I need to contact this mushroom. And so it's quite fascinating to see that we have this information out there and it's being found from people all over the world. And then they share it with their networks. And so something seems to be happening where people are tuning into a certain wisdom, a certain knowing that we might have had in the past. Yeah.
That's interesting that you share that, because after our first conversation, I started finding Amanita also in the forest nearby. Yeah, and I've never seen that Amanita before. It was the first time that I saw it.
Yeah. We have that too, that many people reported that suddenly they're finding Amanitas, or they feel like never have seen so many Amanitas in their lives before, or people that never found them suddenly see them in the forest. So yeah, we have many accounts of that too.
And there, and just to share that also, and I mean, being in nature is beautiful, but there was something special to that Amanita. No, you could really sense there is, even something magical about it, or that you could sense the potency. Yeah, there was something special really about it. Yeah, I picked some, to be honest, and I made my attempt to try them, but it didn't work out yet. Yeah, at least I didn't make it right at that time. But and what you shared, Johan, so it seems that it's really a catalysator or a catalyst or where an individual is. So there's no right approach to it, or like.
If there is, I don't know it. I just know that people say it's a mushroom for adults, and adults people usually have experiences of searching and longing, or attempting to evolve, or dealing with issues. And most of us have been trying many different things in our lives, and read books and followed disciplines or practices or methods. And I believe that even though one have to admit that there is a spiritual element to this, that it's a likelihood that this mushroom is a sentient being with whom we can have a consciousness connection, I still want to proclaim then that there's enough science and enough materialism in this, so we can talk about substances that have an effect on our psyche, that have an effect on our nervous system. So it's really not necessary to make this into a new age belief system, or a new religion, or address it in an unnecessarily spiritual way, with glamour and hybris and projections and so on. The effects are very physical, like you would have an effect of a medication, really.
And I think this is good that you're naming this, because there is, whilst it can be looked at as something very material, it is something deeply spiritual as well. And I think it's beautiful to say, okay, it's not about making it a new religion, or making it like, oh, the Amanita spirit shows me, or something like that. But to see that if we are actually, tuning into what it means to be a human being on this planet, that is, and what is possible for us, that is a truly spiritual experience, and that is to bring us to be spiritual beings in matter, and expressed as into matter. So I think it really is both. We can really look at it as the work that has always been the work of liberating ourselves from mechanicalness and conditioning that we didn't consciously choose, and to become who we truly are and can be and want to be, and what we need to be for our essence or our inner being to be able to express itself. So that work has been going on through the ages, right? In all kinds of techniques, and with or without Amanita Muscaria, we can only, make our suggestions about that, or, have ideas. We don't really know. But what we see is that Amanita is an amazing helper in the work, and then the work becomes spiritual. And depending on where you are on your path, depending on how you have been, dealing with your issues in your life, how your system, in what state your system is, how oriented or disoriented you are, how much trauma there is, how much sickness or whatever, there might be different, a different approach that would be helpful for you. So that's why it becomes a little bit difficult to say, yeah, you need just to do A, B, C, D, and then you're going to be enlightened, because that's just a lie.
I would like that.
I would like
Show
that
me
too.
that method.
But it is messy. Me too. We're signing up. It's messy and mysterious, and I think there are some elements that would be good to be aware of, that can be used in different stages of the work, and how to deal with yourself in different stages of the work, and have an orientation on what are we dealing with. This is something that we've been talking a lot with people about, like a basic orientation about our personality that we are stuck in, the different sub-personalities that we might be deeply identified with, this inner being that has a longing to live and experience things and express itself in the world, and this kind of like difficulty sometimes to bring them together. This is something that we have been focusing a lot on whilst talking about Amanita, because we see that in this work, Amanita can be a very helpful tool.
So from what I pick up on, guidance is important in a sense, to have something to orientate yourself like towards maybe, and then Amanita can be a real support in reorientating yourself. And you, like from what you shared, there can be very different effects from applying or using Amanita. Can you now that you, like from what I know, have worked with many people also with Amanita, share a little bit of what people experience or report back in terms of maybe effects or transformation. Yeah.
Oh yes, there are some glorious stories that come our way, and really life-changing and life-saving things happening. And I would like maybe first to share of our current understanding of the effects of this mushroom and what one can expect and what we see and what the reasons can be. So the mushroom contains hundreds of chemicals, really. And our modern science have maybe names for a section of these, maybe 100 of them. And the two main ingredients that has been researched so far is ibotenic acid and muscimol. However, my understanding is that those two, just because they're prominent, doesn't mean that they are the main thing. It might be a combination of maybe a dozen or more different chemicals that affect us. And then depending on your own chemistry, you will have different reactions in your system. Also, depending on which pathway you ingest it. For instance, if you take it through the mouth and the digestive system, it enters your nervous system from the pathways that exist here. And there are different pathways if one smoke it, for instance. I've heard of people snorting it even, or having it in the mouth so that it goes through the palate into our system. There are ointments. There are many, many ways one can use the mushroom. And of course, different recipes of how you prepare it will also change the constituents. So I would avoid general statements. But still, there are some patterns that we can see. And what we do feel from our own use is that there is a very clear element that is disassociative, meaning that your identification or where your awareness is in your system becomes much more flexible. Mm-hmm. So on very, very high doses, the dissociation is so strong that from the outside, one would describe it as the individual is hallucinating. They are no longer seeing what we see or walking this world as we do. Their perception has been influenced in a way that they are flexible in their impressions of what they experience. And this state of dissociation is quite interesting for me as a fourth way individual. I've been working with the fourth way, which is very much about not identifying with the different parts of the personality, and instead land in one's essence, that in you, which is the experiencer, really, and the one that only lives in the now, while most of our personality has no idea what that is. It's living its way through these mechanical imprints or programs that we have received or given ourselves through life. And this disassociation, even if it's very, very small, like you take a microdose, it's barely perceptible. But what one usually register when starting is that you have more space to choose. You have a little bit of a more distance to habitual behaviors. So your identification with your personality or the sub-personalities that we all carry around becomes much looser. And you might then be able to have more choice and act differently.
Something I just want to bring in here. So we hear from many people and also have our own experience of that you come into a situation where you would normally just be triggered in a certain way because the other person is an asshole or they're saying something. And of course you would fight because you have a right to, defend yourself or whatever. And suddenly people report that they are having a choice of being different in that situation. They suddenly can stay calm. They can have a much more of a dialogue instead of a fight. They just said, I'm just nicer.
I don't notice any effects, but I just notice nicer, as if that was not a fact.
And it's funny, like everybody has their own experience, but we are having this, like there's a little bit more space where you can choose how do you want to be in this situation.
Yeah, so I actually have some imagery I could show you, and the way we explain it in our presentations.
Please, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So our nervous system have this response and reaction. There are like we call them electrical signaling in our nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And in the bigger picture, it's basically looking more like this. It's a constant reaction mixed with our own actions and responses to things outside of ourselves and inside ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a signaling pathway, and if it goes on over time, it basically becomes like a highway in yourself. It becomes something that reflexively is triggered very easily and habitual, or what we would say, it becomes a pattern in your personality. And of course, that is not just on a psychological level. It's also an imprint in your whole system, through your whole organism, and on all the different tissues, etc. So your posture, your facial expressions, the way you move becomes part of your personality. And if we image the full sum of ourselves as a ball of this, all what we are, one can see that over time, these pathways are being triggered maybe by the same people or the same situations, and we develop behaviors, and we develop parts of our personality that can respond to these things. And this is how our personality is basically being built. And we have tried to image this for ourselves so we can understand it better. And the image that came was an image of a coral like this, a coral built of calcium. Over time, these firing of your personality reactions and patterns are creating pathways that are more or less fixed. So this is not flexible. It's built of calcium, right? So one part of our personality can be the one we have in our intimate relationships with others. Another part of our personality is what we show when we are on a Zoom call with an interviewer. Another part of our personality is our profession when we're out working, etc. But they are relatively fixed. In here somewhere is an essence that wants to live and reach out to the world and be part and present with everything. And we find ourselves quite stuck in this habitual reaction patterns that we have. Now, you want to say?
So the interesting thing is also that these, like all these branches that Johan was now pointing out, they all would identify themselves as I. So each of those branches would say, I like, and I am, and I want, and I don't like, and I'm like this, and this is possible for me, but this is not possible for me. So a lot of, that creates a lot of tension in us. And many of us find us in this kind of like almost fragmented kind of inner experience of like, oh, I have all these different inner voices inside of me, and they're all saying something else, and who is the right one, and how do I negotiate between them? So there is the whole branch of psychological work is just about making peace between these different eyes, that we have inside of us, and help them to communicate in a better way, or create a container where we hold them inside of us. And part of the reason why we are so stuck there is because of our identification with them. So that's where this associative aspect of Amanita Muscaria is so interesting, because we are so identified with these parts that it becomes difficult to get perspective, or to loosen up the space between us and these quite mechanical states that are conditioned into us from before birth. This is like our nervous system is conditioned depending on how our environment is dealing with us, depending on how tuned in our environment was in our growing up. We are more or less having a good relationship with this inner being inside of us, or we're really fighting ourselves all the time because we're supposed to be like this, and this is the strategy how we will get love and our essential needs met. And so every one of us, we are basically stuck in a survival strategy that has worked for us in our childhood. And now this is who we are, right? And this is our story that is confirming why we are the way we are. So there on many layers, it's very difficult and challenging to step out of that, because it had to do with survival. So it has a very good reason why it's installed and why it is the way it is. And when we want to change it, we will have to probably confront the things that were the traumas that were, overwhelming in the past, the beliefs that we have integrated where we are loyal to our parents or to the priest or whatever. So there are lots of fears and insecurities. We don't know who we are if we are not that. Our whole cultural conditioning that is in there. So it has, and every system, this is a system, our personality and all these sub-personalities, every system has an interest in keeping the status quo, There is an impulse for growth, but there is the first impulse is for safety and status quo. So there is a lot that we need to deal with when we want to change,
And it's very interesting also to see that in these different parts of our personalities, we call them sub-personalities, together they constitute our personality, which is what essence is not. Essence is supposed to live our life and have direct access to the experience of now. But the personality has built around us as a protection. And so in the personality is often built in the reason why that part became a fixture of ourselves. And that has to do with what you said before, the protection of our lives. And that system is the reptile brain. It has some very basic ways of reacting, like you flee or you fight or you freeze. So we find that many parts of our personality has these things baked into it.
I just want to add something very quickly. I just heard the other day an interesting other way how the freeze can show itself, which is fawn. Like in the animal world, to fawn is when an animal pretends as if it's dead. The one thing is you actually freeze, something just gets in freeze. But then there is a part which I would, because I have a pleasing personality, so the whole pleasing syndrome is a form of freeze, It's like some sort of like, okay, I can't flee, I can't fight. Okay, how do I need to be so that you will not, hurt me,
Okay, and these reactions from our reptile brain is then keeping our upper function or higher functions from being accessed by ourselves, because we get locked in this fight and freeze and flee and fawn. And it's quite interesting to see how then the personality that we have is protecting ourselves, but it's also shielding ourselves from what we actually want. We have these fixed parts of ourselves, more or less fixed. And the work, as we say, is like a term that's been used for thousands of years, is always the same: to become flexible and not have these limitations, to unlock ourselves from the limitations of the personality. And one of the effects that Amanita Muscaria has is it affects the GABA receptors in the reptile brain. And it basically relaxes that part of ourselves up to 20 times. I've seen numbers, which would mean that the habitual way of reacting is no longer a must. And then suddenly we get access to those higher parts of ourselves that could react and change differently, or maybe even act in the world instead of just respond to things outside of ourselves.
React.
Yeah. And I want to show something also with this image here. Something we have noticed is that in ourselves and also in others, that we have this ability of experience life. These are basically where in us we can be in our lives. And we might notice that someone around us is actually experiencing something out here. It might be a situation where they have access to wealth or fame, or they have access to love or sex, something that we really need in our lives, but we don't have. And the tendency of us is to try to pull this out here, pull it into our life. We read books, we go to lectures, we have practices. We want this out here, but we want it in our life. And the sad truth is that only those that have built their coral structure or their personality out to this area can actually have it. So it becomes clear then that working to experience the things that you really want in your life is a work of changing yourself, changing your person, changing who you believe that you are, so that these experiences which you long for can be accessible for yourself. And this is also something that you can see is very helpful when using Amanita Muscaria, because not only does it affect the reptile brain, it also introduces access to the brainwave state of theta. The theta brainwave state is where you spend much of your time as a child, when your personality is starting to become programmed, when you become a person, basically, not just the one who experiences the now. And this is then written very hard and stuck in your early years. And as we grow older, it becomes more and more calcified, like this coral, and more fixed. And we become identified with it. We forget that we are the one that experiences now, and instead we believe we are those parts of personality that have learned to live in this world.
And part of this, like in our childhood, when we are in this more imaginary state, in a very receptive and malleable state, is that also we are building in everything that is in the system around us, like this. It's like filling our subconscious with beliefs, with conclusions that we made about ourselves and about the world. Oh, they are so nasty with me. That means that there must be something wrong with me, And then these become like basic, deeply buried programs inside of us that we are almost having given to us like in a hypnotic state. So we are living a little bit under hypnosis of these very early programmings. Program underneath, like what is written into the Festplatte, the hard drive, is something that will never allow that. There's a whole hypnotic element to this whole endeavor as well. The beliefs about life, about ourselves, that we are not conscious of most of the time. We just see that our life is stuck in certain areas, or we look at it and say, this is not really what I meant. This is not really what I wanted. Why am I stuck in this, while other people can have that experience?
I don't feel true satisfaction is also something many people feel. This is not really satisfying me anymore. I thought this would make it for me.
We just are having access to when we are falling asleep or waking up, or in a super relaxed state, or when we are with a hypnotist or so. So we get access to our subconscious whilst being aware, or we can ask questions, and then we are somehow guided by, might it be the spirit of Amanita or our own sub or super consciousness. We just can be guided towards the places where maybe those root programs are sitting, where we can go back to early experiences in our childhood, or to certain feeling states that we can start to recognize and disidentify from. So it is a very mysterious work. That's why we are so aware. Everybody needs to enter their own mystery. Where are the places where you need to make a conclusion, where you need to understand something about yourself or your story, where you need to something that you thought are you, or that you thought that the world functions like, or what is your true self, or so it gives us access to places that are otherwise not so easy to get access to.
In a way, you get access to this, the place in yourself where you write your basic programs for your personality, the personality through whom or through which your essence should live the life. Essence should experience it through the personality and express itself through personality. Have done it over many periods of time historically. However, when we have a schooling system like we have now in the modern world, the emphasis is on the growth of the personality, and growth of essence is neglected. And it might be that over time you are not happy with this, you try to remedy, you might find inside of yourself, or your therapist might find inside yourself, the inner child, the one that actually wants to live this life and experience it and benefit from it and have its needs fulfilled. And we proclaim now that the work of catching up, so to speak, when you find your inner self and you can identify with it, you can help it grow and catch up with your very effective and useful personality, and maybe rearrange it so it becomes a much more effective tool for essence. There's a way of showing, also then if we use this image of ourselves as a ball, that much of what we experience in life is actually happening just within us. So now when I sit here and I look at Simon and I'm talking with you, I really don't know who you are, but I project a lot upon you, your facial expressions, what you wear, how you're sitting in your room, etc. I project my experience, and that becomes who I relate to. I don't really relate to you. I relate to that inner bubble inside of myself, which I have constructed. And this can be useful. I mean, in many occasions in life, it's very useful. But as an adult, we have a feeling maybe, or many of us have the feeling that we want to relate and have a full experience of the world outside of ourselves, of nature, of people around us, things that would be actually fulfilling the needs of the essence deep inside the personality. And Amanita Muscaria chemically just helps us to disidentify from patterns and parts of our personality, which acts as the original protection or the original facilitator of interaction with the outer world, but as an adult, more often as an obstacle or a pattern that we have a hard time getting away from.
Something that I just come to think of listening to you is that whole aspect of, like you were saying, you're relating to your projection. We are actually relating to our assumptions about the world, and that we are assuming a lot of things about the other person, about ourselves, about the world, and that's then how we behave and how we are in the world. And in a way, there we are stuck in time. We are, because there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of stuff from the past that we are locked into. So we are kind of like stuck in time and stuck in mechanical, repetitive patterns that just fire a certain way. And where real contact would happen, or real that experience of being alive or being present, so would happen in the now. And interestingly, Amanita Muscaria is called by many people the time mushroom. And we have come to, from our experience, we have come to really rather call it the now mushroom, because we feel like it actually is introducing now into the system. There's like a now consciousness. You can more experience that on a higher doses, then you get the like, whoa, this is really different. It's different from any other, psychedelic experience that you will have. You can only create and be something new in the now. And that's where we all want to be, really. We want to be in the now. That's where we feel alive and where we have connection, where love is, and where we feel that there is meaning, So it really helps with like stepping out of time and coming more into the now.
And in many ways, the way our subconsciousness, who is the main keeper of these programs, the way it works is very similar to how computers work. Computers are basically an image of ourselves. It's basically impossible for us to create something which is not part of us. We would image ourselves into the technology that we use. And this aspect of programming is something that you can become aware of and have much use of in your work with your personality. So in the way we look at it at this point is that while the chemicals in the Amanita Muscaria, now we're not talking about the spiritual side of things, we can talk about that too, but the purely scientific, hardcore, physical, chemical reactions that we have in Amanita Muscaria in our systems allow ourselves to get access to this programming state, this programming feature. Of course, if you're not aware of it, you might just live as normal and you will program yourself the way you've always been. You don't notice any effects. You might have less stress, or you might want to sleep more, and you might have a little bit more flexibility, but you're not aware of this aspect of actually changing your personality. And we look at it now as if we are walking this world. We are receiving and sending out. We walk this world. Our feet, our hands are very active. We bring impressions into our system, and this is what programs us how to live in the world. And we believe that it's possible to use these states of Amanita Muscaria, the theta brainwave states, to inject new programs into your psyche, into your person. So those programs that were there when we were 3-year-olds might not serve us now as adults. They might be a block, a hindrance. We have been there millions of times. It's a highway of energy. It's like those old roads in Rome where the wheels have been going the same path so far, so long, that they are 30 centimeters deep. How do we change this? Well, with the help of these chemicals, change becomes possible.
And with the help of the neuroplasticity that Amanita brings in, because it actually makes things that have been like this Furchen in the ground more malleable, and we get access.
So this change then that Amanita Muscaria makes possible is the possibility to affect and change those deep programs in our personality, in our subconsciousness, and also superconsciousness.
And with change, I think what is important to understand is that because my experience, I've been trying to change my personality, this choral structure for ages, like this, my whole life I was working really hard to try to change certain, identifications. And they keep getting me, they keep grabbing me back into these states. And what is interesting is that I'm starting to, with Amanita, becoming more aware of when I am in my personality and when I'm in a more essential space, when I'm more here and now, when I'm more flexible inside of me. It's a very different experience. But he had so many years of meditation behind me or whatever.
I just want to comment this. So this part of yourself might be that part that says, one day I will be enlightened. One day. Yeah. The problem is that if that program runs in you, then in 10 years, it will still be one day I will be enlightened.
So when we have a little bit of a fucked up personality, which we all have, most of, very few have a useful one. Then we will be kind of like locked in this, like trying to change this fix the problem, right? We want to fix the problem. We want to fix the problem because when I have fixed the problem, then I'm going to be free, instead of recognizing that, okay, so this is the structure. This is kind of like the know thyself part of it, recognize this is our personality. All of this, the nicer parts and the not so nice parts. And then recognize that there is something that I have a longing for that might be out here somewhere. I long for it. And to get there, I can, with the help of Amanita, I can grow new pathways towards it. Like Johan always says, it's like a hairline. It's like a new energy line. And by, for example, I can wish for, I sometimes try out things like, I say to myself, I am this now, I say, now I am happy, or now I am this and this that I'm longing for. And then depending on what it is, with Amanita, I can either be shown like actions, like real, like steps that I can take towards that. I might also be shown exactly that part of the coral that I'm so stuck in that it will never be possible to reach that. Like I can see, I can have it even more strongly, the experience of where I am.
Of not having
it, or where I am doing exactly the opposite of what it would mean to go there. But also that is helpful because it becomes much more, I become aware of it. And then I can make a conclusion. I can recognize it for what it is. And I can say, oh, this is not me, or this is not helpful. And then I can start to tune into the longing. I can become guided by the longing. So there is these different stages depending on what it is that you want and what it is your soul or your essence, or how you want to call it, is looking for. But to tune in with this being and the longing of the being is a very good orientation factor,
Maybe just to complete the picture a little bit, we can see then in the ancient practices, which we now realize are very much involved with Amanita Muscaria, there are some patterns. You have, for instance, you ask a question and you get an answer. You write to Santa and you get answers. You make a wish and it is granted or is given to you. And you pray, or you use a mantra, or you use an invocation, or you use affirmation. So prayer, we can see now what all these things actually meant, or what we believe they actually meant. A way of actually writing your personality and writing your life in a state of being here and now. So by doing what you said now, for instance, is an affirmation. I am healthy. I'm very healthy right now. You might be fighting with a severe disease, but you give your subconsciousness this message. Now we know that maybe 30 or 40% of all has an element of placebo to it. This is scientifically proven. Why not use that for our benefit? We let our subconsciousness run the program that we are super healthy, we have no issues, we feel great, etc. And maybe the old choral structure had said, well, if you have smoking in your life, you will die from cancer. And you have thought that thousands of times, and that is running in the background of your life, or any of these programs. They have an enormous power over you. They have an enormous power of locking your system and your organism into a pathway. And when you unlock this, when you get flexible, you can plant new programs. You can make a counter program, for instance. And of course, it's just a hairline first, a small little flash of an electrical pathway, and therefore repetition becomes important. And that's why this repetition of the mantra, or when the magician says his spell over and over again, there's power in repetition. That's how we know that we learn anyway. So this is just one of the ideas, one of the concepts that we are guided to when looking at, so what does these substances do to us? And how can we, in our context of personal development, use them? That doesn't mean that this is the only way of approaching the mushroom. You can have a history or a tradition in your culture which clearly opens up for you, and it might be relating to different things. And there are people that are much more focused on the access to higher states of consciousness and what the work that can be possible there. And then we come into the spiritual side. So, for instance, there are people reporting that if you smoke the Amanita Muscaria, there's a pathway opening in you where you can eventually come to a state where you meet your ancestors, for instance. And it's not just one person saying this or one individual. It is a repeated pattern, which means there must be something to it. And what would that mean then? Well, we know that many cultures have been talking about contacting your ancestors, communicating with them, ask them questions, having them ask you questions. Now, maybe our way of interpreting this is a little bit different than most. So we don't believe that your ancestor, or I don't believe that your ancestors are actually your genetic ancestors, the people that were giving birth before you to your grandfather and so on. In my way, as a esoterian or a Western esoterian, I more interpret this as if you climb up the ladder of your own consciousness, you approach your soul. The essence is here to experience things, that are collecting experiences for your soul, and your soul is containing all your earlier incarnations. So my interpretation is that you can actually climb so high that you contact your ancestors, your earlier imprints, your earlier experiences as a person on this planet. And there are many pathways and there are many ways of framing the experience. It can become very religious, it can be very spiritual, it can be very new agey and mystical. It can also be very scientific, like as a medication against different syndromes in the system, like depression and other things. So we hope that we can add a little bit from our specific angle to the bigger picture. We don't want to stamp on anyone else's foot or infringe on other ways of connecting with Amanita Muscaria and what it means for them and what use they find. We want to support everyone in their pursuit of truth and happiness and the genuine experience as a human being. Just as a general statement. And we also don't portray ourselves as gurus or especially enlightened in this area. We are on the same level as you. We are also having personalities. We also have issues with our person. We have relationship issues. We're just normal people like everyone else. We are all in the same boat. And we can together rediscover what Amanita Muscaria can mean. Clearly, in long periods of time around the world has meant so much that temples have been built and whole religions have been started. So that was a big download for you.
I was really amazing, to just follow what you were sharing, and it makes so much sense. And the picture which came to me is that and that's how I'm discovering myself as well. I have a fixed understanding of who I am, and Amanita Muscaria might support in making the fixed volatile, to kind of like recognize yourself beyond that fixed understanding, but then also, depending on what's your intention, actually, to support you in fixing you anew in a way which is aligned with who you are, not the product of conditioning or maybe lack of validation for who you as your essence actually is.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And maybe that also, like, just from my personal opinion, so that said, it can be very challenging to to step out of repetitive patterns, and there's also like, maybe if you don't have like supporters, so there can be a lot of like inner tension in that moment, which you like believe you must do a certain thing, and that's the only alternative. And if you decide to not do that, like you kind of have to stay with that like a huge tension at times, and that and might seem without any alternatives in that moment. So that's very interesting to hear what you're sharing. So from like, Amanita might support you, like, or that's what I'm painting in my head, that's supporting you in discovering other.
That's very accurate how you're describing it, how we also experience it. It's like the being, the experience, or the being is getting nourishment, and therefore can even make these challenging experiences, because there's actually somebody a little bit more at home inside, and can start to have a more friendly attitude maybe towards difficult parts of ourselves, develop self-love, which would be like the basic ground to stand on to build any kind of life that would be in tune with your essence. I'm finding that self-love is such a huge theme for all of us that have been so identified with something which is not love, because it's not being in the here and now in love. So this unconditional yes to our experience, however that might feel and look like, right? That's a whole theme in itself. So we have found a few things that are popping up when people are starting to use Amanita. Like, one is the whole work with your dreams, for example. We have just recently connected with a friend who is very much working the Toltec tradition of dream work.
She knows who she is. Hello, thank you.
And we don't know anything. We really don't know anything about it yet, but we are very aware of our dreams and how the dream life is changing when you are starting to use Amanita. And that is placing itself into this whole context of working with your subconscious and also your superconscious, and also maybe this sentient being of Amanita that can communicate with you in your dreams, and how you can actively learn to first of all experience your dreams more consciously, to learn to read what the dream is telling you, but also maybe even to actively create your dream. And the Toltecs, for example, they're saying if you are creating your waking reality by building your dream reality, so that you're actively building the reality. So we don't know enough about it to really say much about it, but it's a very fascinating topic to bring into the whole thing, that we are much more than just our waking consciousness and our waking efforts. We can write down a question or something that we need we want to heal or investigate or find an answer to before we go to sleep, and then see what we dream. And see what emotions, what feelings are coming up in the morning when we are lying in bed, and sensing into what's going on. This is the place where the work with Amanita becomes truly fascinating, where you can start to really heal and integrate and find roots of problems that you haven't been able to understand.
I'd like to comment on that. Because then we enter into a little bit the traditional work with therapy, which often is about finding what was the cause of this behavior, this pattern in your life, and what emotional content is there. And many people are afraid of this. And of course they are, because the reason these feelings were locked in to a state of emotion in you is because it was too much for you at that time. And especially as children, we often did this. The experience was overwhelming. We couldn't feel all of these feelings in the now. And much of that energy was stored in the form of emotions. And in a therapy session or as an adult journeying into yourself, you might bump into these pockets of emotions. And if there are, well, actually, there are lots of these pockets in all of us.
Even physical problems have this content of emotion that is locked in there that you could, go into. Yeah.
And in your journey then to become more aware of all the parts of your personality, to know thyself, these pockets might start to release some of that energy. So the feelings can come back and you feel the emotional content. And then the issue itself might reveal itself as a little incident for the child that as an adult, that emotional or that feeling would be easy to experience in the moment. But as a child, it might have been impossible. And it can be then complicated by having a forbidding feeling state that one doesn't want to experience. And then this personality builds other emotions around it. So it's a whole complex that you might have to deal with. I just wanted to count that to the point. Yeah. The point would be then that we want to reassure everyone that you will not be thrown into these situations in a helpless way, and you will not experience things that will be overwhelming for you, because this is a function of you preserving yourself from overwhelmness. If you would be presented to a situation that would be truly overwhelming, you would basically faint as a way of protecting yourself. So you can trust your system. You will not be overwhelmed, and it can be portioned out over time. Yeah.
I just wanted to throw in there something about like something that is these locked emotions, or is connected with this state of freeze in the nervous system, where we are basically like in something is locked and we don't have access to it. So in a way, one could say that Amanita allows us to access this freeze states while we still have a being that can be there we can be with us while we are experiencing these things that otherwise the being would just disconnect from it. It's too much. The being can't be there. And then we kind of like have this little gap, and it can help us to bridge that gap and bring all these resources back into us, because every traumatic experience in a way cuts us off from some resource of our being. So we are just collecting all this back into our being,
remembering ourselves, becoming whole again. And so there are levels of how deep you want to go into the experience of Amanita Muscaria. And if you choose to, maybe Simon, you choose to start with the microdosing at one point, then you will maybe enjoy them, the relaxed states. You will enjoy the alignment of different states of consciousness at the same time when resting. You will enjoy closing your eyes and very quickly drop into theta. You might enjoy the extra clarity that you have access to when the stressors are being relaxed, and you actually can think things through, and you can have the overview of the tasks that needs to be done, and you immediately see the priority. So that might be the first experience that one have with Amanita. And what we would like to add to this is then the awareness that when you open the coding area of yourself, you are constantly writing, and on a deeper, more effective level. So then we can look at maybe the Eightfold Path of Buddha. It starts to matter what you think. It starts to matter what you feel. It starts to matter what you do. But maybe more than anything, it matters what you say. This vibration is almost like a physical manifestation of thoughts and emotions and ideas and imagination. And that's why incantation has such power. It's where your higher self is landing in the physical world with the incantation. So your words is the way that you can program yourself, and you can program the world around you.
First was the word. Words create realities. So it's also very good to ask questions, speaking them out. Like I have often, when I'm in this dream work, sometimes I just wake up from a dream and then I just have to speak out a question. Or I've had this experience very much lately that I'm looking for something and I'm looking, and when I speak out, where is this thing? Where is the key? Then I find it. So this is very practical thing, but it's a good example of there is like something with when I'm asking the question, something becomes real and aligned in a different way. And with Amanita, we find that writing it down, speaking it out is very, very helpful and important. We also really recommend writing a diary. It's also something our shaman friend, we're working with a shaman from Estonia together.
Vadim Strutsenko.
Vadim, we're making this possibilities for people to have a safe environment, to have a higher dose experience, because we would not recommend people to go for a high dosage event by themselves.
Because it's so disassociative.
Yeah.
Not be aware of the physical world around you in the way you normally would. And also, it's very important that someone with experience can be there when you're in a very deep state. So if you start to open your eyes and start to be, that someone can be there and meet you in that very strange place that you are and help you to come back into the relaxedness of sleeping and going inwards instead of outwards. So there are lots of elements to it, and Vadim is experienced, and we love Vadim. He's a fantastic person to work with.
And just to come back, it was one of the things that he also very much recommends is the writing of a diary, to write down what you're experiencing, to write down your questions, to write down your conclusions that you're drawing from what you are seeing and experiencing. Because whatever is put into words has a much different effect and meaning. That's why we also have like weekly Zoom calls where we are inviting people who are microdosing or who are experimenting with Amanita to come together and share about their experiences, because we really see that it's bringing much more effect if you put things into word. If you listen to other people and how they experience things and how they describe what they're experiencing, there might be things that you are not aware of, that are clearly a change that is happening, but you're so, gone in your half dream state of the soup of everyday life that you're not aware of this, but then somebody else is naming it and you suddenly get that gift to yourself. All right, this is happening for me too. Or somebody is asking a question or saying something which is the answer to your question, because this is another thing. You will get answers. Amanita Muscaria is quite absolute in that it gives answers.
It's like the better Google.
It's like it's also called the father. It is a little bit strict. It's not, if you give a wishy-washy answer, the question, if you give a wishy-washy, like just kind of in this child consciousness of, well, you know what's best for me, just give me that. It's going to give you a wishy-washy response. So we are called into this self-responsibility to engage in our question process, because finding the right question is actually making your way towards the answer, because you can only ask a question that you somehow have the answer already inside of yourself. So the process of finding the question that needs to be asked is fascinating, and I would really like to encourage that in people to also be in a state of be the question, and you will get the answer. And then it can come either really as a voice in your head or in a dream. It can come by you opening a book somewhere, or somebody is saying something to you, or somebody else is asking the same question and somebody's giving the answer. Or you're just finding yourself living the answer, living something else suddenly that you didn't even know you had in you, So this whole thing of question and answer and learning to recognize that what you are living and experiencing is the answer to something, And then maybe start to, so what questions or what programs did I ask or did I have that this is the answer to, And how do I change my question or my programs?
what is accessible for you, meaning that your life will change. You will experience different things. And this is a very conscious word. You mentioned before, just the thing to choose to not do something that you habitually would have done. In Asia, that was called the wu wei, not doing. Of course, it's been part of a practice. And now, with the use of Amanita Muscaria, many of these old methods and practices gets that gasoline that they need to actually drive you somewhere, right? I just want to let the cat out before he starts to meow too much. Hang on a second.
Yeah, sure. One thing I'm curious to hear, because you mentioned microdosing and then also larger doses. Could you provide some reference in terms of like what that equates to, like very practically, and for example, grams of powder or something like that?
So the mushroom itself is a living being, it's an organism, and the strength of these different combinations of chemicals will vary from mushroom to mushroom, even if they are from the same mycelium. Mm-hmm. And they will range from, depending on when in the season they are picked, at what stage they are picked. So it makes it very difficult to give a general answer to how strong is it, what is the chemical that. So, for instance, if one pick the mushroom and dry it using heat, then that will change the chemics and the mixture in the mushroom. And if you have a higher heat, again, it will have a different effect. If you let them air dry, it will have a different effect. If you use the mushroom as a seed for the holy wine, like making like a holy grail wine, where you pour it into a container, you pour some sugar liquid into a container, you add some of the mushroom and you let it stand for 30 days. And there's this fleece, this wool on top that you take away, you kill the lamb and you drink the blood. So there are the soma version, the ambrosia version. There are so many different ways of preparing it. And we see even now in what is most common today is to purchase dried Amanita Muscaria. And even there, then each cap has a different strength. What we do to try to have some kind of guidance is that we make a powder based on many different caps so that the difference in strength will even out. Mm-hmm. And then this powder then can be used. And depending on how you respond to it, you start with very little so that you will yourself understand what type of dose you will need to have a certain type of experience.
So just concrete to your question about grams, and so a microdosing dose would be everything between 0.3 to about up to 1 gram per day. And we make this powder, we fill it into capsules so that you have a little bit of an idea. But we have found now, by working with so many people, that we have seen that it's so individual. It really is an adaptogen, and every system, every individual is so different. For some people, they need to take 1/8 of a capsule, and that is already enough for their system to process. While others take one in the morning and one in the evening, or they take one in the morning just like this. In the evening, they make a tea out of it, and then they would go up to like 0.6 to actually up to 1 gram, depending.
Mm-hmm. When you order them or where you get them from. So these are powders inside of a capsule. You can open the capsule, of course, and you can portion it out in hot water if you want to have a more calming effect, because if it's heated up close to 60, 70 or 80 degrees, the Muscimol will be increasing because the ibotenic acid is actually transmuted into Muscimol. It's transformed by carboxylation.
Decarboxylation,
yeah. Very difficult to answer the question, and it isn't a mushroom for adults. So you will have to be put into the position of being the one that is responsible for what you do and what you don't do, and in what way you approach a mushroom like this, in what context you use it, and what your goals might be. We can only come from our point of view and present the context in which we work, but that might not be valid for everyone. To answer.
Yeah. And when it comes to like we really recommend that everyone would start with microdosing if they want to work with Amanita Muscaria. And then you take that for a few weeks. Maybe you take like one course for a month, and then maybe you take a break or so, or you start to space it out a little bit, that you just take it every few days. Many people also in this microdosing phase, they need to take a break sometimes because they might get a headache, because there's a lot of cleansing and detoxification. There is many different symptoms that might come up depending on what needs to be fixed in your physical body also. So there is like, it's really a healing agent. It's antiviral, antibacterial, antiparasitic. It's even can work with cancer, because it could lead you to those traumatic places inside of you that need to be healed in order to heal the body.
Those very deep settings, right?
And these deep trauma, or places where the soul is just stuck in something that's not working for it, and then it just rather kills this avatar and gets a new one. One could say, because it can't express itself.
It gives up. It's respawning.
Yeah.
So we want to respawn in this life.
Fixed.
Yeah. So it's so individual, and it's really, the invitation is really to listen to your body, listen to what feels good, not force yourself, not have an idea of what would be good, and therefore I have to go through this. No, go with what feels good.
So some people might have a very strong experience with very little, and others might have to need to take a little bit more. But it is an adaptogen, so you might yourself respond in a different way on a different day with the same dose. Mm-hmm. And it was used in the past, and with what we can recall, or what we can see in the past customs, is that one microdosed every day maybe, and then you spaced it out for every third day, maybe every fifth day, but then it landed somewhere on every seventh day. So you had the holy day, the Saturday, where you drank the blood of Christ, you ate the flesh of Christ, and you dosed that to that level that was good for you, so that it will last for a week, right? And you could continue this practice. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I just want to, talk a little bit about these things that you can expect when you are microdosing, and then what would be the difference with higher doses, and so that there's a little bit of a practical information here also. Mm-hmm. So, like one thing that many people are reporting is that they're getting very tired in the beginning. Especially, actually hear it even more from women than from men. And I know it also for myself. I was tired for weeks, really, really tired, and feeling like I need to sleep more and I need to rest during the day. And it's good to when that comes, to not be afraid of it, to just embrace that as much as possible in the life that one is needing to uphold. Because this is where Amanita does a lot of the healing work, and where a lot also of this subconscious work that we've been talking about before can happen. Just to close your eyes for a few minutes during the day could be very helpful, and allow your body to sleep, because we are all so conditioned into overriding the signals of our body for rest. Rest is really not very popular in our culture today, and we are all overstimulated and pushing ourselves constantly. So I think that most of us have some sort of a chronic exhaustion that needs to be dealt with first before anything else can happen. So
also
just
for physical healing and health. I've been recently hearing that if you do have a wound or an issue, or you get an impact on your body that hurts you during the day, the body only does triage in the beginning. It basically just fixes what needs to be done then, but the real healing happens when you're sleeping. So if you really want to care for your health, and if you have maybe a bigger health problem, sleep becomes even more important for you. Yeah. And therefore that can also be very beneficial then, with something that helps you to relax and removes the constant triggering from devices, and so that triggers our reptile brain into stress.
Yeah, so not be afraid of that. I'm just come to think of children that just sleep themselves healthy, like I know from our kids, when they got sick, or myself also, they just sleep for, 12 hours straight, and then they are well again, or you can actually come up at a different, you respawn somewhere else, kind of. That's also an experience that I know very well, like being stuck in some sort of a personality pattern, then really getting really tired and needing to sleep and kind of relax out of it, and then maybe come up somewhere else when I wake up again. So this
helps doing, really.
Yeah.
It really helps doing that.
This is one of the things, if people get headaches or so, that they might need to drink more, because the body might need more fluid to clean itself. Some people get more of the symptoms that they don't like, and all of that too. If you have an attitude of basic faith in the process and trust, and also listening to your body, not overriding, but being curious about what's happening, then it's a very good basic attitude to navigate whatever is coming up for you, because it's a unique path for each one of us. And to be aware of that, there are some common denominators, and it's really good to share about them and orient yourself. But then to be open to your experience is really good. And then you can take sometimes a little bit higher doses, up to maybe like 5-6 grams. That would be called a macro dose. Up to maybe 10, depending on your physiology, like how much you can take. And there you would get different experiences. There you might get experience of getting your thoughts become very fast, or feeling like changes in your size experience, or getting a download from a voice or whatever. Also super individual experience.
And changes in how your personality perceives time, because the personality is basically partially subdued, and then you come into a state of now, which is very, very different from experienced time. So
this might be even something during the microdosing, that you suddenly feel like you're a little bit spaced out with your everyday life that is a little bit tacted, and suddenly you're missing appointments, or it's difficult. So you really need to be aware of that you put things into the calendar. Because the whole perception of time and coming more into your own rhythm, not into government time that is been put onto us, but into like you're living more in the now and from inside out. So there's a whole reorienting process going on as well. And then when we come to the higher doses, just to finish this with the dosage, the higher doses events would be about 15 grams. And that we
anything from 12
hero dose or?
Oh, yes.
Well, yeah, it's like our friend, he says, like from 15 up to 20, it really doesn't make so much of a difference anymore how much it is. Because if it's like up to in that amount, you will have it's a different thing altogether. And
you will disassociate properly.
Yeah. And then it doesn't really matter if it's 20 or 15 or so that, yeah. And you're basically up over a certain threshold.
And then again, what happens will differ depending on who you are, right?
Yeah. And just to, so that there would be the recommendation to be with some guidance, right?
Like absolutely. You need to have somebody who keeps your physical body safe, because you will not be maybe not aware of what your physical body is doing.
In the old days, the temples served this purpose where you could come to a temple and you can get a very high dose, so high that you actually went into a coma for usually 3 days, while your body is being served by the temple priests or the personnel, the staff. And then you come out reborn. You have had 3 days of experience something where we are overwhelmed with just 5 minutes of it. It can feel like 5 hours when it was just 5 minutes.
And but that's not, the coma doesn't happen with the 15 grams, so no worries.
Anyway, so that is more like, there's so much we can talk about this. We can only scratch the surface on these talks, and we'd love to come back to talk more. What we do offer is to collect our understanding and share with many people. And if you feel like you want to know more, please search on YouTube, search on Google. There is so much information out there. Don't just trust one source. We all come from different directions and we have different understandings, and over time these might change. So it's not uncommon that someone makes a claim in the beginning and then after a few years they make a different claim. But do research. And of course we offer people to come to a platform that we built where you can in private communicate with other people that have experience of the Amanita Muscaria. And I think that one can even log in or get access to the platform just following this link, right? So we are not pretending to be exhaustive or all-knowing or anything. Also, when we meet with groups of people, what we share is basically based on Q&A, questions and answers. There are books written about this. There is an enormous amount of knowledge, and it's like we're catching up. Humanity is reconnecting to old knowledge. Well, if you just become enlightened and open the Akashic records, and you will see it all, right?
Well, thank you so much for sharing from your experience. And I don't have a last question. So, from you, like what you have been experiencing, and from your understanding, are there symptoms of withdrawal, or is there a sense of addiction when one starts using, for example, a microdosing protocol and then stops doing it? Maybe that would be maybe something to be interesting to hear.
If you start to use this in a regular way, it means that you're basically constantly being influenced by the effects of the chemicals. Then you will become different. You would actually have a different experience of being you. You might be feeling in the beginning very tired, and then after that, maybe just more relaxed and less stressed.
And then after that, maybe more irritated and more more self-assertive. There might be all kinds of,
She's experimenting with a new version that we made.
You suddenly feel have a strong no about certain things.
So what we did was we picked some Amanita and we put it in a freeze dryer. So we're giving this to the community as a way of preserving Amanita for decades, and with a very high amount of its original content. The freeze drying is supposed to preserve 98% of everything that's in the food item. And that preserves the color, the taste, and the aroma. And of course, that is all chemicals. And so we have done that. We have freeze-dried some fresh and raw Amanita. And Marianne is the guinea pig. She's been trying it out. And I said, what I experienced, it's a different being to be with. I can no longer overpower her. I can't force her. I can't pressure her in the same way as I did before. Like my person was interacting with her person in the past. It doesn't work anymore. She's self-assertive. She stands her ground. She talks back. It's a mini nightmare. I'm just kidding. But some of the effects is that you become more centered and in touch with yourself. And as much as that is threatening to my personality that had a pattern with this 20 years, it's also lovely for my essence to see more and more of this woman that I love so deeply. But I hate her person, by the way.
Okay.
Deep within, we love each other.
But to your question about the addictiveness or withdrawal systems, we haven't heard any of it ourselves. But
some people talk about it as there can be a slight hangover, and they might recognize this if they have been working with alcohol a lot, drinking a lot. Then the hangover is also something that has to do with your GABA receptors. And Amanita Muscaria does affect the GABA receptors, also those that are involved with alcohol. So there might be similarities in how you feel things there.
And it's rather so that you actually, because it does taste really nice, actually, and that you feel like taking it, your body wants it, and then there's times when you really don't want to take it, and it's almost like, oh. So also there, it's good to listen to yourself, and when you want it and when you don't want it. And, sometimes it's weeks where you really don't want it. And I know for many people, they just don't feel the impulse. They don't want to take it. And then suddenly they're like, okay, now I'm going to take a piece, or now I'm going to take a capsule, or whatever you have. You can also, if you just have dried caps, if you have them at home, you can just take a piece of a cap and put it into your mouth and let it, salivate and eat it like that. So it's also a way to eat it that many people really like. So no, we rather see people report that they're suddenly coming out of years of depression, or suddenly they are sleeping like babies. That is also suddenly they can sleep, or physical things that are being repaired, or all kinds of things. Even the difficult things, people can look at them in that frame where they see that this is something they need to go through, they need to sort out for themselves. So life-changing things. Yeah, we are usually quite touched when we are having these Zoom calls just by things that people might report that they don't think is a big thing, but we look at it from the outside and we're like, wow, this is amazing.
Like, for instance, no longer be stuck in one part of your choral structure, one set of sub-personalities that might change someone's life in a most dramatic way. And this is what we keep hearing. I would say, from a medical standpoint, or from a modern scientific, everything is matter standpoint, that can easily be explained then with these substances and their influence on our psyche and our nervous system. But then other people, they have an opening to their essence connection with spirit or with soul, and having a dramatic experiences. I don't want to go into that too much, but we don't want to make promises that we can't validate or stand.
That is also important for people to not. Oh, but again, then this person had this to me. I'm just having a headache. Exactly. You have these expectations, and really just to say, it can take a long time, and I have had phases where I really felt like I'm really working intensely on something, or I can feel something is changing, and then I have had weeks where I have been feeling like, this is not working. I'm just stuck somewhere. This is the same shit over and over. And so, and as I said before, like, be curious and open to the experience, because that also is part of the process, and not just, dismiss it or think that something's wrong with you. You are the one where it's not working. It works for everybody else, but not me. That's part of a personality program usually that is, telling us that. Just to not have too many expectations, but be curious about how it is for you.
And if you're someone that has started to microdose or have some experience, you might be interested in one of these events that are going to be held by us. There are other people creating events where you have an opportunity to have a high dose experience led by someone who is experienced in this. And if you would like to maybe check out what is available in Switzerland this winter or in December in 2022, you can just check this out. And keep your eyes out. Don't listen to just these two idiots here. There is an enormous amount of information out there, and it's almost exploding. And also then research that has been done by medical companies with the hope of being able to patent something is also advancing, and we will learn more over time. Of course, then don't dismiss the traditional wisdom of shamans and the work that they do. Even if you're scientifically oriented, keep your eye and ear open for also the spiritual aspects of this medicine.
Wow. Thank you so much for this very thoughtful sharing of experiences with us. Truly fascinating, and makes definitely curious, I think.
We're bombarding you with stuff. No,
absolutely.
I hope it's okay. We are spending so much of our nows with this that we are just full. We could just really talk for hours about this stuff. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I think there's some interest, for people to get educated about this team. So I thank you very much for doing exactly that. For bringing that to our awareness. And I feel in a very undogmatic way, and that resonates very much with myself. So thank you for.
Thank you. That's really our intention.
Important that if this doesn't resonate to you, or you feel irritated by something, just dismiss it. You don't have to believe everything that is said, and you can stay with what your world is convincing you of. Our intention is basically this: that we want you, everyone that we are in touch with and work with. We want everyone to manifest their own world, and that they are creating their own self and their own life, and that they follow their own calling, and whatever their essence is directing them to do in this life. It's not up to us to say what is good or bad. It's up for you to find that and follow that, just like Buddha said, right?
I think that's also very much your intention, Simon, with
exactly. That's the whole point why I started this.
Exactly.
I wanted to share really helpful, insightful, interesting, empowering perspectives without implying this is what you should be doing.
That's perfect.
And I think this is also what makes it really pleasant to talk with you about these things, because of course the listener is co-creating the space in which information comes out, because I can feel that the way you're listening, the way you are open for this information makes it something that is not dogmatic, and that might be helpful for many different kinds of people from different orientations. And so really thank you very much for asking us questions and listening and opening the space and inviting us. Thank you very much.
A big pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Again, and of course, everybody who is finding this conversation, listening to it and watching it, thank you also for taking the time to be open and curious.
To give us your now.
Okay, that's it. All the best, and
thank you.
Till next time.
To you too. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
what's my potential? What's really inside me? Is it possible to be joyful and to express who I truly am? Do I have unique gifts and talents? If I do, how do I find them? And if I find them, how do I bring them into life? And is it even possible to make a living from what I actually love to do? Those were some of the questions which drove me now more than a decade. And I don't want to give you a definitive answer, but I learned very valuable principles on my quest that helped me to discover who I am and to bring what I am actually into this life, beyond expectations, beyond conditioning, beyond limiting or self-defeating negative thoughts. And now I want to be the bridge and pass those principles on to you. And not only remind you with my words, but actually enable you to discover and experience that for yourself, real self-discovery, that you are a wonderfully creative being, a genius in the truest sense of the word, and you have the potential and the possibility to unfold what is actually in you and set yourself creatively free. This is my mission. Very important, please don't believe my words or possibly your own skeptical thoughts, but check it out, experience it for yourself, and take part in our next seminar, Structural Creativity. More information here. I'm really looking forward to set your creativity free.